The only thing that has ever changed the world anywhere, is a group of determined people. I think Nelson and I starting that business helped me understand that if you treat your work like art, there's a responsibility that you have if you have an idea to try and make it real.
What can we do as entrepreneurs? Because we even don't have a startup kind of body, like you said.
Politically speaking, people respond to group interests, not individual votes. Group interests. So if we're the most entrepreneurial country in the world and we don't have an entrepreneurial body, are we really? We're just a bunch of individuals trying to do something. I think where we're at now is leadership is sort of what you look at to blame someone for things not working. We've made leadership a position instead of an orientation. If it's an orientation, it means if you see something, you should do something about it. This is really great because it's showing the entrepreneurship journey, the framework, but the broader context is why are you doing it? What are the mental blockages that you might need to fix? That one is not an academic matter. That one is usually from interaction with people from different walks of life. Best things I saw being in uni abroad was seeing how many companies come to the universities to just say, hey, what ideas are you working on? I don't know how many companies go to Makerere and say, oh, what are you working on? It's usually people from Makerere begging to get a chance to work in the businesses.
How has it been like managing teams in such an era and with the team dynamics that we have?
Every generation thinks guys don't want to work. I don't think that's true. I just think people don't want to be exploited.
In such an era, for small businesses, and we are saying that we are the most entrepreneurial country, we have the most startups for businesses, how do you build systems that are going to challenge the status quo? And
there's something about organization and creating structure that makes it easier for everybody. I can't emphasize that enough.
And our guest today is an amazing person. I have followed Joel, I think, for like 3 years or something, yeah? I follow the channel, I follow what you're doing with FlyHub, but probably I may not be the best person to introduce you. So the first question would be, who is Joel?
It's a deep question. Joel was born 1985. The reason I'm setting the context is because I want to show why I made certain choices I made. So anyway, I was born middle-class family. I went to all the traditional schools, including the very annoying school on the hill called Budo. I was waiting for people to boo, but you guys are very kind, so thank you very much for. Yeah, that's the real feeling. It's there. I guess I thought I was going to become a doctor. That was my drive. I was very interested in how things work. No, first I wanted to be an astronaut, and I remember I told my dad I want to be an astronaut, and he said, "Where?" He was too realistic. He broke my heart into two tiny pieces. In S4, I did quite well, and I wanted to do the sciences, but I had done slightly better in arts, so I was doing history, economics, literature. And in S5 second term, it was the start of my problems. So I have a problem. I always pick the hardest thing to do. So I was doing well, and then I noticed at the time, I'm going to show my age. It was 2003? Jesus, 2003. And at the time, you needed to have certain points in order for you to get to university, and for sciences, the points were lower. Also, if you did sciences, you'd get any career that you wanted. So I decided to switch to PCME. Did you guys do math? I think all of you did math at A level, right? Sub-math, it's okay, it's math. Don't, it's okay. The sub is just a qualifier. Anyway, so I switched over. Now imagine you'd last done math in S4. I walked in and saw integration by parts in second term. And I started calling upon the Lord to help me because I didn't understand what the hell was going on. So long story short, I didn't do as well in my A levels, and I got government sponsorship for construction management and then for a business degree. Up until the age of 18, I didn't know what business people do. I knew they're important. They wear suits and everything. My family is full of engineers and doctors, and everyone has a sort of craft, but I didn't know what it was. So I went into that field and I didn't know what I was doing. And during my time at campus, I started my first business. So a friend and I, this was a long time ago. There never used to be live bands in Kampala. So people would play a CD, and then the artist would pretend that they are performing.
That was before Afrigo?
Okay, hold on. Not before Afrigo. Afrigo had, and then there was a gap. I think the only band was like Kwela. But Kwela used to perform like their own original music. But, we were performing our own original music. If you want to find it, it's called HOP Band. But I think the thing I learned from it was my best friend, Nelson. He just used to start things. He would start things, he had no plan on where it was going, but he'd just start. I was different. I used to calculate a lot. And I guess maybe to round it out, who I found out I was, I tend to think quite a bit about things. I tend to ruminate on things, abstract them a lot. But the danger is I end up not taking action. Because in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what's the end going to be. And I think Nelson and I starting that business helped me understand that if you treat your work like art, there's a responsibility that you have if you have an idea to try and make it real. We often think about, how will they see me doing that? As in, how can I fail? Nelson didn't have that. Like, for him, sometimes I'll tell him, I think you just like falling on your face, because he started an ice cream business, then at the same time you're selling shirts, then you're selling CDs. This was one term, like different, just trying things. Meanwhile, I had been thinking through different things I wanted to start. Anyway, I guess the big takeaway is I found my strength is that I can get into details that no one else really wants to get into. And because of that, it's led me towards different careers. I've ended up obviously, I worked with MTN at some point. That's when I got into the digital wallets, doing the first connection for bank to wallet. Then I went to Zambia to do some work with a company called Zona. So I guess the big takeaway I'm saying is I every few years just try to change what I'm doing and scare myself. Because when I'm scared, it's when I don't know what I'm doing, and when I don't know what I'm doing, I become curious, and when I'm curious, I'm more likely to do something. When I stay in a space too long, I think I start to think I know all of it, and pride comes before a fall.
Yeah. How long have you been at FlyHub?
My employers might be watching this. This is my third year. Yeah, this is the end of my third year. I joined September of 2021.
Okay, thank you. So when I was following your background, or the time I've spent following you, I have really loved your passion or your interest in philosophy, which is something you've not mentioned. Where does this start from? Where does the love for philosophy start from?
I told you I was born in 1985. We had different kids. We were born just after the war, so we had many things to think about. It comes from my father. We had a deal when we were younger. He would say you'd have to read a book, then tell him at the end of the week what was in the book before you had a chance to watch TV. And trust him not to have any children's books around. He just had there was like this big book on the Soviet Union. I was reading it. I remember at some point in school, they were like, "Were you a communist?" I said, "I don't know what that is, but I'm enjoying the story." So in a way, he kind of primed me to keep sort of asking questions. And I think for most people, when they think of philosophy, they think of something like, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, did it make a sound? Like that kind of thing, which is really a bastardization of it. For me, it just means that most, let's say philosophy of technology versus people who are doing tech. Everyone here probably is very practical in the stuff that you do. You know where to get the libraries, you know how to, code in certain languages, you know the rules. The guys who are studying the philosophy of it are not building on top, they're tearing the bottom down. They're checking the assumptions. So it's really just how do you think a new thought You either build on top of what other people have thought, or you try and change the framing of the issue. So I've always been interested in how do things change, how do systems change. So it kind of was just my personality. And luckily, when I was in school, I also found a few other people were interested. And so I started reading up on it, and now I'm sharing it because when I was young, I didn't know other people were interested in it. So now there are a few other people I've infected with it. But it's helped, I think, in terms of the different careers I've had, because if you look at what I studied in school and where I am, I shouldn't be where I am, but I did okay.
Okay, thank you. And talking about where you are now, the background is that you are a thinker. You love philosophy, so of course, we usually call philosophers thinkers. I would want you probably to set the pace from where you are, from your experience, and the context in which we are, Uganda. How would you define leadership where we are today?
So I would think we are very, very young. So when I look at how old Uganda is, my father is older than Uganda's independence. There are a lot of people around, the people who run this country, so the Union Jack go down. Now, for us, it's a complete, in my mind, when I think of those times, it's even black and white. There was no color in the world. There was all this hope and joyfulness and a vision of something new is going to start. And I think now there's so much of a saturation, not to paint it too differently, but being African right now is kind of difficult because we are a net receiver of many things. We have foreign shoes, foreign cars. Our cities are starting to you call something modern because it's starting to look closer to what New York looks like. And I don't know if you ever travel and see what those places are. I was very disappointed when I first went to America. Seeing a homeless person in San Francisco. I was like, this is one of the richest places in the world. There's a person sleeping on Skid Row, and the benches they had, you know how you can sleep on a park bench? They had put spikes there because they don't want loitering. And as you start to think about it, you're not welcome in the city, but your money is welcome. And I've started noticing the same thing in Kampala. I mean, I don't know if there's a place you can go and hang out where you don't have to spend money. Do you guys know? By the way, tell me if you know. I also want some places I can go where I can not spend money. But I think where we're at now is leadership is sort of what you look at to blame someone for things not working. So Twitter, which I'm always on, I think it just exists for us to go and, these guys are stupid, these things are terrible. And what I've found is if you give people a chance to run something, they're scared. With my team, a lot of it there's fear. Because it's easier when you're sitting at the back. When something fails, you can go, that guy messed it up. I was involved, but I was just doing my job. So I feel like we've made leadership a position instead of an orientation. If it's an orientation, it means if you see something, you should do something about it. The fact that you've recognized it, there's some responsibility. The second bit is, I think, maybe we have become too individualistic. So everyone is trying to be the leader, but we can't all be leaders in every context because then no one is following you. You're just going for a walk. I think this will take time for us to redefine what it means for us. Unfortunately, a lot of the definitions, a lot of the technologies, the things that we take come from different contexts, and we think they are neutral, but they're not. They carry with them the context, the thinking, and that's why as you adopt more and more technologies that come from a specific culture, your culture starts to take on that appearance. People talk about mobile money a lot. If you try and mention mobile money to someone in South Africa or someone in the US, they will never understand it because there was no reason for them to have that kind of innovation. But when it comes back now, think of all the things that are being built on mobile money. There are a lot. But mobile money is they call it a digital payment system, but it's really a remittance system. It was designed for me to send money to someone who's not physically present. But the way people started using it was, I'm at the shop, I'm going to send you money. but you're right here. I'm now paying a charge to pay you money. So it's more expensive for me to send you money than pull the cash out. So that business model now seeps into everything that has been built on top. I think we'll have to get to a certain place where we say, okay, we've built enough on mobile. Is there something else we can build on top of? I think that's the point when things will change. Otherwise, there's this inertia of, everything has to build on top, build on top, build on top. And if the foundation was never meant to hold that, it becomes shaky. So, I think leadership is focused so much on, middle income status, and the vision we have is of states that already exist in the world. For it to change, it would have to be, can we imagine something new? And to imagine something new, you have to think in ways you've never thought before. So that's the challenge, I think, for young thinkers, to break themselves from things they've seen so they can imagine something new.
And what I pick from that is that there is probably a lack of originality from the things that we are trying to probably admire or something like that, or things that we're trying to build.
Yeah, but it's also, I want to sound very political here. So, like these shoes, right? Who made these shoes?
But Nike probably, yeah.
Oh? Okay. So when the shoe is made, it's Nike that made the shoe. But in truth, the people who actually made and sold all of this shoe is from Taiwan. So the patents are held in the Nike offices. Someone in Taiwan is building it, and it comes to us. Have you noticed when someone buys like an off-brand version of this shoe, they're like, be serious. What? Why are you wearing a nuke? Like it's off. The thinking we have is it's not the quality of the shoe itself, it is the brand. It has a sort of magical element about it. So I think now there's this mental shift where you're not looking at what the thing does, you're looking at what people perceive it to do. I don't know, you've seen, I was going to say people with their MacBooks, but I also have a MacBook, so I'm out of it. Guys who sit with their MacBooks, open it up, and are sending emails. But from afar, you're like, that guy is serious. He's serious. He must be designing something far off. So when you get the benefits of appearing to be productive, it's very hard to actually be productive. And yet our problems are quite different. And often I think sometimes we try and replicate things that we've seen elsewhere. The people who I really pray for and wonder about are the guys who are trying to solve things like transport. People are trying to solve things in agriculture. People are trying to solve things in the way food is delivered here, because that's when you push up against the real forces of Uganda. And bigger businesses have come into this space and failed. Guys with great plans. So it's not an easy task, but I think we're the ones who have to figure it out. Yeah.
So before I even ask why you think we're not yet there, I would probably want to talk about something to do with adapting, yeah? You've talked about how we're trying to adapt what the Western world has built, and you talked about how perception is even more important than what something can actually do. Do you think it's something that we've adopted from probably the context or the environment we've grown up in, that we've been pushed to think that particular things are superior, or probably it is something we're adopting when we are old? Is it from upbringing, or it's something that we found when we are old?
No, I think, I don't know if you remember when the government blocked Facebook, right? For, I guess, removing NRM online, and, it was sort of perceived as stifling political speech. The minister then said, why don't we build our own Facebook? And we all laughed. Nonsense, right? So there are certain things that you can't even imagine trying to do. Now, I don't think it's our issue, because what's the biggest tech company in Europe? Does anyone know? A big tech competitor for Spotify. Any other? So all of Europe, the guys who conquered most of the world, and I always wondered why. The only other competitors in big tech are in China. Now, about 20 years ago, the Chinese were seen as really, what are you doing? You're blocking Google from coming into your space. For what? It was seen as repressive. Now, if you think about it, the messages we all receive come filtered through certain businesses that have certain points of view, but it's presented as neutral. When you want to get neutral news, you maybe go to BBC. I don't know if you have access to the World Wide Web. Have you ever seen Chinese news stories about America? You don't even think about looking for it. That's what I mean in terms of the blockages we have now are not necessarily physical. Like my father will tell a story of, I had to walk these many miles to get to school to get the knowledge. I have something that is the most powerful computer that he has ever seen in my pocket. But it's like I'm drowning in entertainment. It's already prefabricated, it's already preset for me. I mean, there's this move now to no code that's happening, right? Which is giving, you can describe it as more people are getting access to build stuff. But like I was telling a friend earlier, it's an interesting thing. The millennials in my office know a bit more about the workings of the computer, like the hardware. Well, the younger guys are much better at coding, but they don't really understand, like the entire setup. So you look at the laptop and think that's the laptop. You're not thinking about what the infrastructure is like, what's going, like the entire network of things that have to function for your thing to operate. Now, it in your head. I was about to tell my chicken joke. If you followed my thing, I can't tell the chicken joke.
You should tell it.
I have no idea. I'll tell it later. I'll tell my chicken joke. So we know it in our heads, but we don't know it in our actions. And I think maybe that's why I was fortunate enough to actually live in a different environment and be plunged into stuff that you had to do. When you're different to a certain society, you see things that the people there don't see. And the only thing I saw, I didn't see people who are much smarter than us. I didn't see people who, were any different. They just had exposure to stuff that we never had exposure to. Like, you have access to a laptop at the age of 12, you can, with high-speed internet, you're able to be exposed to so much more. So I find it kind of weird. Sometimes I think there's this tone of, Ugandans, there's that thing in the air, and I've tried really hard to fight against it, because what you're recalling is you're seeing that person's life experience. You're not seeing their potential. So for someone to look at you and judge you living in a country where access to electricity is like, 30%? The cost of internet is one of the highest on the continent, and someone's trying to build a business with the tax regime we have, with the lack of access to infrastructure. Like, it's so much greater. So when someone just gets their business to survive, I think that's a great thing. There's also the push now, and I think it happens in our community, and maybe we'll talk about it. Many people looking to IPO, or many people looking to scale. All right. I think some businesses are not. I don't know. I don't know if everyone's business should. Yeah, because for instance, at Stanbic now, we're trying to do this program where we say, do you want the business just to pay your bills and you leave it at that? That person needs different support to someone else who's saying, I want to conquer East Africa. But because you're going to get money from the people who are saying we want to scale, so everyone's pitch deck is now, we are going to scale and take over Africa. I'm like, we are going to be the Uber for the time when platforms were. So if the business model you have is one that assumes you're going to dominate the entire space, where is everyone going to do stuff? So I'm thinking that the fact that we have access to so many different pieces of information, and yet it's so difficult for us to even break out of these mental blockages, is probably where, for me, philosophy has helped, because I'm always asking, where has this come from? Why is it framed this way? Trust but verify, but it takes a long time. I don't know if I'm allowed to use certain spicy language here. The BS moves a lot faster than factual confirmation of things. So you almost have to, and because we're very individualized, everyone is sort of policing themselves. So we are all seeing the same world, but we're seeing it in different fragments. So that's, again, another challenge that everyone is building in. Why I'm encouraged, maybe seeing everyone here, is physical meetups, conversing where you're breaking down those barriers. Hopefully some businesses will be formed where it's a collaboration. the reason I mentioned the story of Nelson is we both had the same idea. And when we first met, because our idea was to start a studio that was going to record a lot of live music, like really do it well at a fraction of the price. And we had a connection with a company in Germany that was ready to print the CDs for different people. He had the connection, I had the access to the software, and we were both going to try and get the thing done. But I mean, why didn't we share? I think a lot of the time, because we see each other as competitors instead of as collaborators, I'm trying to maximize my small pie, and yet we could have a share of a much bigger pie. So that ability to think that we're in it together, we're trying to move a certain space, that's something I learned from the short time I spent in China. Their development model is so different. The idea that, all right, you're in my neighborhood, I need to serve you something, you're going to serve me something. And once we've established that, then we're going to build on that trust. To get into that kind of environment, to start doing business, is incredibly difficult. If you try and enter the Indian community, for instance, in Uganda, to try and do business, well, who are you? Where have you come from? What is it? Meanwhile, us, we might meet in the boardroom, shake hands. I don't know who this person is, and I'm meant to give them a portion of my business. It's a very unique setup. So you have the cultural bits that come into the way business is done, that is in a culture in Uganda, and the culture of Uganda is not really entering the way we do business. So I think the next step is for us to figure out what's the Ugandan way of doing business. Because for right now, if you go to school, you get the academic piece. You do a nice pitch deck, do this, get there, and the money will come. Then when the money doesn't come, you try and look for a reason, and you say, it must be me. Why was I born under a bad moon? So I think there's that issue. So ultimately, I think the reason I asked that question of Europe versus America, if you go to any European, they'll say, yeah, we're at top of the range, we're doing quite well. But they aren't really pushing in anything that is consumer friendly. Their stuff is more biomedical, it's really specialized. The US is dominating, but now China is building their own cloud capital. So they're the only ones who can now have an opposition. So I would encourage us to look at different perspectives from where you've been looking. You probably don't know that there are certain ideologies that you're following, even though you believe you're not following them. Because to me, an ideology is not in your head, it's in your actions. So now, can I tell the joke?
Can you tell that?
The joke.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I apologize ahead of time. This joke may not land. But for those of you who laugh, the Lord loves you. So, there's a man who wakes up one day and he thinks he's a grain of maize. I'm a grain of maize. So he goes to the doctor. So the doctor, guys, I'm a grain of maize. I don't understand what's going on. The doctor is saying, of course not. You're a person, you're talking. They put him into treatment. They take him through some analysis. At the end of 2 weeks, they ask the guy, what are you? I'm a man. What are you? I'm a man. I'm not a grain of maize. I'm a man. Fantastic, you're healed. You can leave. Guy's walking out. As soon as he steps out the door, he sees a chicken and comes running back in. He's like, hey. She's like, wait, I thought we discussed this. You're a man. Why are you running away from that chicken? This guy says, don't be stupid. This is the one. He says, don't be stupid. Of course I know I'm a man. But does the chicken know? You guys are very kind. Anyway. The purpose behind that joke is it doesn't matter what you know, what you think about yourself. There is a part of you that's wondering, how are these people thinking about me? Now that part determines more about what you do than anyone else. So I feel like we are confident within ourselves, but when we start saying, but what is that guy thinking? What's that guy? What are they going to say when I start the business? That's the thing that matters more than what you believe about yourself. So I think we've overinvested in self-belief. I believe it's important, but it's not enough. It's more important when you sit in a room, are you confident enough to stand by what you're saying? Because you know these guys are going to believe me. But if you think that chicken is going to eat me, you're as good as a grain of maize who's a man. Yeah.
Interesting. So you've talked about Europe, you talked about China and what they're doing and how it is influencing us. But probably what was going through my mind is, do we have any thought leaders or people who have build stuff here in Uganda that has that original touch that probably you've interacted with, and maybe the people in the room could look up to and pick a lesson or two? Do we have any technologies that we've developed that probably you've interacted with and you feel like they really have that Ugandan way attached to them?
Yeah, but they're not famous people. Okay, one thing I've seen, at least from the places I've been in, is Ugandans are actually quite strong in East Africa in a lot of policy, boring stuff. There's a concept in systems design called the shield of boring. The stuff that is so, eye-wateringly boring, like the tax regime of what it means to ship things from Tanzania to Uganda. And if you ask most business people, they'll say, the economists know. Now, what we don't get is those things affect your life in ways that you cannot imagine. I forget the name of it, unfortunately, because it's a very long name by design. But through the World Trade Organization, there is a sort of court where if an international player is coming to set up a company, say in Uganda, and it wants to get some, confirmation that this investment is going to be protected, say, yeah, arbitration is going to happen here, and businesses can sue countries. I hope you know that, right? So here you don't know much about it. So a lot of the things you may see the government doing, you don't know that there is a certain player that's saying, for the next 10 years, you can't allow someone else to come into this space. But the face of it is our government. It's an easy thing, which is why I feel that when you say a politician or a government official acting dumb, it is by design so that, abuse, the job is I take the abuse, you guys feel okay, but you don't change the system. But you've all shouted. Now, if you take the time to understand those structural things, you realize that papers that are signed in boardrooms that we never get to see affect how we do stuff. I think once we get to that level, you find a lot of Ugandans, actually. I mean, there's the Ugandan judge of the ICC. The Ugandans, especially those who've gone into policy, into accounting, that they're actually doing a lot of work, but it's not sexy. The things that maybe people give as examples, Java's, Safe Border, and the rest, I'm not, going to put them down because they've done something incredible. They found a market and then been able to corner it. But those are also still downstream from the people who determine, you guys all have startups. I don't know if there is a startup body that advocates for policy. I don't think there is. When I joined the bank, I realized Bankers Association, they have a meeting every month. All the banks sit down, say, hey, what are we going to do when we're discussing with Bank of Uganda? These are our interests. So they don't motivate by, it's the right thing for you guys to do. Business and innovation is that, no. They're collectively coming as an industry and saying, give us these benefits. And unfortunately for us, I think we're all in the same struggle, but we are not in the same struggle. Right? Like you're all suffering the same thing, then you all go home and say, hey, what are we going to do? And it's, I was at church the other day, and they were praying for people in need. And someone came up and said, I've lost my job. I don't even have enough money for transport. What? And then they said, oh, come and we pray for you. And I said, what? They prayed for them after having collected money in the millions. And they said, we give thanks, and booked the money. And this person was there saying, I need money. But nobody could think, why don't we give you some of this money? That's why it's a mental block. I truly feel like there's nothing I can say that's more impactful that you can't find out from yourselves. I can't tell you the 7S models. There are all those frameworks that you've been exposed to infinity. I guess maybe the one thing I would add is, if you don't have comrades or friends who are lawyers, who are economists, who are, doing procurement, like those things which are not really sexy, you may be seeing them for their service, but ask them, like, what are you really doing when you're doing procurement law? Like the government of Uganda, for instance, has been trying to procure software where they have the right to customize. Now, if you can't customize, let's say you buy something from Microsoft, you have to wait in a queue for them to make the adjustments that you want. By the time the adjustments are being made, they are probably out of date. So that dependency, when I go back to the Chinese example, they said for the next 15, 20 years, we're going to build our own thing. So if you look at what Tencent is doing, I don't think that can ever happen in America, because in the US, you've got two powerful industries. You've got banking and you've got telecom. Those two, by design, cannot mix. So to tell them mobile is, what have you said? Mobile what? Money? How? Elon Musk was talking about trying to do that with X because he saw it in China. But to then think you go to America and try and start it and you fail and then you blame yourself is probably the same as being in Uganda when you try and start a business and then it fails. It's likely that you take it as you're a failure instead of this system, this environment is not conducive for that kind of production. People don't have enough exposure, there's not enough access to stuff. So probably the task for us is to do certain things that we won't benefit from. It's, teaching a few kids how to code. It's teaching a few guys how they can start up a business. Things that are in the air, but they can never get them. Your responsibility is, maybe I should start sending that information to the people around me. And then as network effects happen, you start to see the changes. Again, the country is very young. We're trying to do long-term things, but we're looking at economies where the baseline has already been set. And so for them, it's a small jump. And it's a tough thing because to me, when I was a kid, I wasn't seeing kids in, I don't know where. Like you open up TikTok and you see a guy living a great life on your condo when Umeme has switched off. And you're like, yee. And you also want to have your one life be great. So I think it's a wrestling match for you to say, what is your contribution to this country, to your community? To me, that's what lands things. I came back to Uganda because, one, my family was here, but also, two, I felt like all the people who were in my class, the top 12 of us who got scholarships, only 2 of us came back. So you take that human capital, you've been blessed and fortunate to learn something, you go somewhere else to make your life better, and I can't judge them. But like for us, the task is different. The task is to build something, and to build something means probably it's going to outlast you and you may not see the full benefit of it. So in that context, you have to have something calling you that's bigger than your own selfish success. It's, am I making things easier for the people around me? So it's a tough road that we're on. That's why I resort to thinking about it and looking at old stories. I think we don't think enough about how did Singapore become what it became? How did even countries that you may demonize, like how did the Soviet Union go from an agro economy in the 1920s to setting up the first satellites? They set up satellites before the United States. How did the internet come to be? Who are those guys who were working on research? Just asking questions. They were not trying to seek for profit. They were just asking questions. One of the best things I saw being in uni abroad was seeing how many companies come to the universities to just say, hey, what ideas are you working on? I don't know how many companies go to Makerere and say, what are you working on? It's usually people from Makerere begging to get a chance to work in the businesses. So it also degrades what you think a university is doing. So it's a long-winded answer for me to say there's a lot of stuff for us to do. And I think this is really great because it's showing the entrepreneurship journey, the framework, but the broader context is, why are you doing it? What are the mental blockages that you might need to fix? That one is not an academic matter. That one is usually from interaction with people from different walks of life that give you some information and your openness to collaborate and share your knowledge with them. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'll just jump back to the entrepreneurs. I think most of the entrepreneurs I've interacted with, whenever you tell them, man, what is stopping your business from growing very fast? The first thing many of them tell you is like, government is fighting against us. Leave alone that capital thing. Many of them really think the policy environment in which we operate is really not for the entrepreneurs. Yeah. Most times farmers thought government was on their side until we started talking about coffee of recent. So it brings me to the question of what can be done in that area, because I think most of the policy influence we're doing is on Twitter. We're not really doing the practical stuff. Yeah. What can we do as entrepreneurs? Because we even don't have a startup kind of body, like you said. What can we do in the meantime to create an environment that is going to allow us to lead ourselves into the future that we really want? And we've talked about originality.
Yeah.
Be able to build such kind of things.
You remember the traders' strike, right? The weird thing was, like on Twitter, guys were going, "Hey, these guys don't understand IFRS. IFRS is not a tax." I was like, I don't know if you've attended those events where someone is saying, "We're going to give these guys financial literacy." And then someone like me who works in a bank comes and tells people, "You should save some little bit of your money, and as you save, you're going to get somewhere." In fact, if they were to reverse the roles and tell that banker to live on 200,000 shillings a month, the person who survives in this city knows more about what a shilling is and how to survive than someone who's receiving a salary all the time. These guys, I don't understand why they can't do their businesses. You actually notice a lot of guys will tell you you're job creators, but they never leave their jobs. They'll tell you guys create a job. I'll stay here, but you guys, it's tough, man. Things break. So I think acknowledging, number one, that the people who you think have it figured out, it's probably that they're in good situations. It's probably they were born at a time. I started by saying the time when I started, there were so few people who were doing the work where you understand bank systems and telecom systems. It was such a short list that me getting in, I was mediocre. I'm familiar, I've done it. And then I learned on the go. Now, if someone was to try and get into that space, there are so many people. So I think you have to think locally and then think, what is the context I'm in? Like if you read in the newspapers that, I don't know, inflation is going up, cost of living is high, and you're about to start a business, you must understand that it's going to be tough, right? Like, it's going to be tough. I can't believe things are not working. Maybe I should do a better pitch deck. It's not the deck, you're collecting the information around you. It's also understanding the times on when should I launch. So to your question, the traders, when they went on strike, at the same time, I think we were complaining about the march to parliament. We were talking about, corruption. And it's funny, the people in my social class were mocking Gen Z. They were like, "Oh, this is a Gen Z protest," which I found funny because it's, the best way to hide that you're scared is you mock the person trying to do something. "Do you think anything is going to change?" I'm like, look at what you're saying. You're saying that for you, just take anything government does. "Yes, sir, please, thank you very much. You've caned me." And you're preventing a small population from thinking politically. So I would say we need to revive the political. And when I say the political, I don't mean political parties. I mean understanding what is your voice, what's the thing that changes stuff. Unfortunately, in this country, we've not learned how, like Labor Day comes and goes, and most of us don't know how Labor Day came to be. Who fought for it? Whose blood was spilled for it? Why were labor unions formed? Why is it that we have a 40-hour workday? Because when you're born into it, you just see that it has always been that way. I was watching one of these movies about Jesus, and they were talking about, "Oh yeah, I work 8 hours a day." Back in 2,000 years ago. I was like, do you think 2,000 years ago people were working 8 hours a day? No. But because it's your frame of knowledge, you push it backwards. I feel like we need our own casita, because when those businesses were on strike, they were able to get the attention of the president. They were able to get the attention of these different individuals. I'm part of the FinTech Association. It was part of something I started when I worked at FST, because the first thing we recognized was so many different guys were trying to get licenses from Bank of Uganda, and Bank of Uganda was exhausted. They can't assess each of you one by one because all the businesses were different. They also don't know enough about what you're doing. So we started it to say this is the framework for the guys who are going to enter the sandbox. This is the framework for how people get funding. This is what we want as a payment service. Because politically speaking, people respond to group interests, not individual votes. Group interests. So if we're the most entrepreneurial country in the world and we don't have an entrepreneurial body, are we really? We're just a bunch of individuals trying to do something. And so usually when you see the guys rising to the top, those are people who found connections and are able to ride on those connections to get to the top, or they maybe started in a space where things were not really that difficult. I mean, privatization in Uganda created so many millionaires because, public assets were handed over to you. And so you then say, hey, I'm in charge of dairy in Western Uganda. Oh, of course, you're going to do well. You don't have that kind of leeway. But let's say you wanted to say, for instance, whenever government purchases something, all the stuff at Makerere should be maybe fixed by local entrepreneurs. What do you think the biggest contracts Microsoft gets? It's US government. What do you think the ones that Google gets are? You can't, if the consumer spending in the country is already low and all of us are chasing that money, it's because it's what's available to you. But how many people are supplying? Who manages the procurement software for URA? Who manages, I don't know, all these there's stuff that is around us that we can't get to because we know as an individual I can't get in there. But if we had a group body, then you can start to shape. You'll even be surprised that there'll be debates we're going to have on certain things. The last thing I'll say is the model that has been preached to us of how we're supposed to grow, which is open everything up, free trade. If I'm a powerful business and I want to enter your market, I'll tell you, you know what, we need free trade. Because then I'll defeat you every procurement deal, I'll beat you. Any country that did well had a mix of protectionism and growth. And it took years to get there. Because when you want to hire people for your business, where are you going to get them? Have they experienced working in a startup before? Have they experienced building something before? Most successful businesses, most successful entrepreneurs were at about the age of 40. They had experience. I'm not learning it for the first time. They also had mentors. They had people who were opening doors for them. We're doing it so hard because we're doing it alone. So this is why I'm hoping maybe we'll sing Kumbaya afterwards and then everyone will get connected. So I think it's just, to me, it's the mindset shift that is going, it's a communal issue. And if we put our heads together, that force is much, the only thing that has ever changed the world anywhere, is a group of determined people. And don't be fooled. All the big businesses you see, all the big economies you see, those guys are working in lockstep. They may not show you that we are working together, but a system is just a group of people working together. They will always beat an individual every single time.
We've tried to talk about leadership and adaptation at a global level, and we've talked about Uganda. Now I want us to zero down to a business. Okay. I think one thing I've noticed with the work I've been doing with StartHub, we live in a time, a day and time where it is very hard to manage a team. Why? Because of the team dynamics that we're living in today. We also live in an era where we're having a lot of identity crisis, if I could call it that. So, of course, it is seen in the teams, the people that we hire every day. People are struggling with many things. I don't know if depression just started of recent, but people are really struggling with many things in workplaces. And it's also seen in the way they work, their behavior. And that's why also the whole thing of mocking Gen Zs comes from. They think they are a set of spoiled young people and things like that. But you are in a leadership position. And I think usually on PPJ, you like calling yourself a manager, but then I think you're in a leadership position at FlyHub. How has it been like managing teams in such an era and with the team dynamics that we have?
I think largely it's empathy. Because once you get to a certain position, it's easy to think of the hierarchy and go, I'm the boss, so I know. And it mirrors the way we are in school. The teacher stands at the front, and you go, I'll listen to them, they'll tell me what to do, and I'll execute. I told you the first few years were very difficult, especially the culture change, because what I noticed with the team in SA is the social cultural climate is such that people walk up to you and say, hey, I've got this idea, let's try and get, even though you're my boss, they were like, hey Joe, here, Mr. Muhumuza. I'm like, wait, my name is Joe. I have to keep reminding you. We like that sort of distance, and I don't know what it is. I think the newer generation is a lot better at it because you put on your trousers one leg at a time, like, me, who are you? And maybe because I'm a little bit younger, I understand what it's like to create an environment where people want to do something. So it's a bit messy, and because things are standardized, to me it has been to try and understand the spirit of the law, not the letter. So things like you should be in the office by 8. It has, from time immemorial, coming on time and being in the office at 8 is how you do your work. So we started that for a while. Then I noticed that a few guys, they show up at 8, but they're not doing anything until like 11. But their bodies are there, their minds are elsewhere. First of all, you're coming from home with the laptop that you're going to then open here, which you could have opened over there. So we experimented with, all right, why don't we just make it such that Mondays and Fridays we'll come in to do our check-ins, otherwise work from where you want. First of all, there was chaos because, someone goes somewhere and they're just doing their own thing. I had to then learn how to manage people at distance. So I've learned that because of the management ethos we have now, it's easy for me to go, I don't know what your name is, sir. Emmanuel. May I use you as an example, sir? Why have you said it? Oh, yeah. Emmanuel, I might go, you're not a good employee. I don't know if you've had that. Ugandans don't like to work. If you want to see the oldest complaint in human history, just look up the first complaint of people don't want to work. Roman times, like every generation thinks guys don't want to work. I don't think that's true. I just think people don't want to be exploited. And people know. I know you can tell this guy is getting away with something. So I understand that our relationship is transactional. You're here to get some money. These other things of we are family, they are nice. Yeah. But I can't fire my father. My mom doesn't cook one day. I'm like, please, it's performance, leave. It's impossible. So I think by being honest about it and me saying, look, I'm here, there's a certain line that I have to maintain. There's a certain agreement that I expect of you. What I'm giving to you is your time and freedom. If you mess that up, I have to pull that back in. So anyone who crosses the line, you end up seeing them more in the office than someone else. And I think if you are fair, more or less people will start to show you. I think people are not children. They know what they're supposed to do. Those who don't, you figure it out really quickly. The other is just having, I think, a unified vision. Like you said, everyone has identities. Like, why are they working on something? My job is more or less just to tell them this is where we're headed and to shield them from a lot of the nonsense. The thing you said about depression, I'm going to say something controversial. Everyone is so quiet. It goes back to that thing of we blame ourselves for being maladjusted. But if you think about the country you're coming up in, the country is kind of messed up. So if you're well adjusted to a messed up situation, are you okay? I don't think so. The amount of info someone received, just, do you know if I had this when I was 14, there is no way I would be sensible. What? Everything in the world is here? TikTok. How? Now, when you go to your parents, they'll tell you, you have to have discipline, self-control. They never had to deal with this. The most honest thing my father ever told me when I asked him, what can I do with my life? He said, I grew up in a different world. When I left university like this, there were cars ready to take me to get a job. You're going to be on the street. He was real telling me, by the way, I'm kicking you out. But it's like, you're going to be on the street looking for work. It's a different world altogether. So I think, again, having collective spaces where we can say it's okay to not be okay. And I think more or less, to me, this is the controversial thing. It's my opinion. I'm not a medical professional. But I think part of the reason it hits so hard is because it isolates you. You feel disappointed in yourself on top of not feeling well. Like, I was ill a few days ago, under the weather. I was not blaming myself and going, I'm so weak, I'm just the worst, how can I get flu? So if you're not fine, it's not something that you should wear as a taboo. It's not something people should be speaking around in hushed tones. But we do that because we think somehow I'm weak, somehow I'm the problem. But maybe the environment is a little bit sick. And so once you understand that, you then say, well, sometimes you need to be carried. And that goes back to the whole thing of who do you rely upon? If you have to be strong all the time, something I've been speaking out on the pod about young men especially. Young men almost disproportionately have depression symptoms that no one picks up on, because the way men display their depression is usually through rage or through having a lot of fun. I've seen those guys who like party from. And the guy, you think he's okay? Like, we're like when we're in lockdown and people were jogging in jeans. I'm like, that guy can't be at home for 2 days just sitting with their thoughts. That you're not Kawa. So I figure that as for us as managers, the thing is, it goes back to the Ford system. If Henry Ford, instead of doing the assembly line, had just told everyone, you need to be motivated, you need to move faster, create the car better, they wouldn't be where we are. You had to redesign the system. So the only way you redesign the system is the people who are working with you usually tell you what to do. Anything that FlyHub has been able to do, largely I'm just trying to get things out of the way of the people who are doing the stuff, let them fail really quickly, figure out what to do, and they'll get it done. But if they're so terrified that you're going to crack the whip when you try and get something done, you're not going to get the best out of them. They'll just do enough not to get fired, which is, I think, most people's experience in most workplaces. You've ever come across someone and like, this guy is just moving at the right speed for not to be, like, you see them walking like this. No, yeah, really, I don't think this is how a person moves. But it becomes so normal because that person is also coping. The laziness, I think, is just you feeling in the room that people are saying, this is kind of BS, man. So let me just do what I'm supposed to do. And we don't talk about it because we think it's immoral. I think once you bring it out, most guys they're able to then go, okay, you found me out. So what do you need? I just give me 1 day off a week. I work 4 days and think, okay, let's contract on that. If you can deliver your things for 4 days, kawa. And the person does it. We're trapped in systems that we think cannot be changed. But everything in the world was created by a person. And because we've not had the experience of building things, we think building comes from elsewhere. Validity comes from elsewhere. And it's a big mistake. Yeah.
Interesting. So just before we go into the questions, this is something probably you can add your thoughts on. Probably most of the people who are running startups may not be at the same level as FlyHub. So probably the way they are running their teams or the systems they're trying to build may not be as FlyHub. So probably from your experience, and we're living in a world where probably every Ugandan who is employed has a side hustle, and many of them call their side hustle startups and things like that. So probably almost everyone has a startup or a business. So in such an era, for small businesses, and we are saying that we are the most entrepreneurial country, have the most startups or businesses, how do you build systems that are going to challenge the status quo? And we don't want to talk at the level of FlyHub. We're talking about the level of someone who's just building, probably just has 2 people that they hardly pay because there is no revenue. How do you build those systems that are going to probably challenge the status quo that is deficient of originality?
Man, if I knew, I would be very rich. I have so many businesses. I don't know. I figure. Have you ever wondered why there's such a focus on small business growth in Uganda or in developing countries? Sorry, small businesses. But if you look at the trends elsewhere, like just look at my industry, banking. Do you think we're getting more banks or fewer banks? Fewer banks, right? The market size disproportionately is going to attract business. If someone tells you I started a small bank, it's called, I don't know, Kampala-based bank, you're like, well, okay, sure. Like you're not going to go there. So again, I figure it depends on what you're working in, because depending on the industry you're in, the rules, the norms are going to be different. Unfortunately, because I'll speak to guys who work in tech and finance, which I guess makes me a tech finance bro, the most evil creature I know. And if you're doing something in software development, you've understood something very difficult. And the temptation there is to think, because you figured out something difficult here, that you can figure out almost all difficult things. I'll give you the example of when it's still big, but for me, I had my questions about blockchain. And the reason I had those questions is because every time I would say, what's it for? Then they start telling me, it's an append-only ledger. Okay. What is it for? It's almost like if I went to buy a car and then I said, how fast does this thing move? The engine is, okay. How fast does it go? Like you have something, but you're trying to fit it into something else. And then I had someone mention something that I'm quite familiar with, which is data privacy. And they were talking about creating a blockchain for medical records. Immediately I had that. I said, thank you very much. You don't know what you're talking about. Other guys were getting money to do transport, for logistics, doing blockchain. Like, if you go and talk to guys at Maersk or any other places that do shipping, they've tried all that for different reasons. There's a reason they are not getting into that kind of business. There's a reason they don't want it to be an append-only ledger that can be public. There are reasons for that. But you can't tell them when you're outside the industry because you've not gotten into the mix. So I would maybe say the people who can teach us the most about doing things are the guys maybe in Chiku, the guys who have started in the informal space, because that stuff is not filtering its way into classrooms. It's the stuff of a guy there. People will probably tell you, this is how you should get your stuff, or this is where you should order things from, or this season, this is what happens, etc., etc. I'm thinking that the reason small business is promoted here is because it's easy for people to start, but they die so quickly. So if it's dying very fast, if we have all this talent in the room, each of you is pursuing maybe a certain goal. Your goals might be quite similar. Perhaps figure out how to work together. Because when you work together, it's now multiple opinions coming into the room. And I was talking to my German friend there in the back, who was telling me, I was talking to him about the culture in Uganda, which I think he has probably faced, is that Uganda is mostly talked about like, we're very polite, we're very nice, we're very hospitable. And I always laugh. Because if you're from Uganda, you also know that we can give you yours, but we give them quiet, in the room. I don't know if you've been in those rooms. Any questions? Everyone's quiet. Then when things are done, in the whole that fool, what was he saying? Just think you understand. Do you know people are louder when they're outside than in the room? And I think it comes from, we are just taught respect before anything else. You guys who maybe went to kindergarten, I don't know if you sang that song, trust and obey. Well, there's no, imagine here, trust and obey. That's what they were telling us. So I feel like our disagreement, for some reason, if there's someone with power or someone who we think has access, we shrink. We don't combat. I think we should combat a bit more. Like if, the World Bank releases a report, are we all going together to come and say, no, the figures that you're saying for the MSMEs are not right, but we just maybe we'll quote it and put it into our decks. That's what I mean in terms of you've not queried the information, you're simply jumping on top of it. Imagine if I went to Geneva and decided, I've noticed that the businesses here, blah, 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 and I issued a paper as a Ugandan. Do you think they won't question what I'm saying? So I figure that the first thing is maybe I really think that body is important. And I'll speak from the fintech space. The difference between when they started the Fintech Association and before, guys are getting licenses much faster. We're able to get the fraudsters much quicker. We even know what the ticket sizes are. And now, interestingly, when it comes to funding, a lot of the impact investors go straight to FITSPA because they'll say, you have the information on where fintechs are. So now fintech is growing really rapidly. And a lot of these companies are not even making profit. They're just running on, hey, we are just trying to get certain numbers. We're just trying to get the network growing. But before, they were all moving in individual spaces. There's something about organization and creating structure that makes it easier for everybody. I can't emphasize that enough. I think once those questions start coming in, what you've asked is, all right, guys, we have all these small businesses, what we should be doing. Maybe we should be buying from each other. If everyone's trying to sell maybe to Coca-Cola, why don't we first start with each other? Maybe there's someone with a reg tech thing that they're working on. Are you utilizing them? Or you'll go online and be like, well, please, this guy might mess up my things. Let me go this way. We treat each other the same way we don't want to be treated by those businesses. So one last thing for maybe the unique experience of FlyHub. So we are both blessed and also troubled with something. trying to build something new in an existing environment. So there is an immune system to try and change those things. It's why I've seen that the stuff that's most powerful is not the stuff that is physically in front of you. It is the rules, it is the norms, and changing it. It took 2 years to do something that a regular startup will maybe do in a few months. But I knew that that was the path. It had to be systematic. It had to be every day until it became the norm. So to me, I think if there's anyone here who wants to start the body, you don't even have to be special. I think you just have to stand up. Most of the time, you're just waiting for someone to begin the first push. And then, like I said, true leadership sometimes is understanding when you need to follow, because someone has a better idea, and you don't lose anything by following someone else. Someone else is also following you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Joel, for the thoughts that we've shared today.